Welcome to the Microcast, the short-form podcast from Microcosm Coaching, where we break down the science, strategy, and psychology behind smarter endurance training. Each week, we tackle a key concept in running, training, or recovery, and we give you practical tools you can apply right away, whether you're building back, leveling up, or chasing down a big goal. We keep it short, evidence-based, and grounded in real coaching experience. No hype, no fluff, just actionable insights to help you train sustainably and perform at your best. Let's get into it.
My name is Kristin Layne. I live in Aspen, Colorado, and I work for Microcosm Coaching. I got into coaching by being an athlete and being really interested in how I could improve in my own performance. I was raised in a family that was really into spending a ton of time outdoors, and I was into a lot of sports. And then I moved out to Colorado and got into more the endurance side of sports. And I found my way into skimo and running, and I loved kind of the races and freedom of moving in the mountains. And as I continued racing, I got more and more into the science behind it. And then I think that I've started out on the slower side and then was mid-pack for a long time and worked my way up. So I think I've seen all the different points that people can be at and realizing what kind of they need to focus on at different points in their athletic journey and applying that into coaching. I really like coaching athletes that have a lot going on because I feel like that is kind of the story of my life. I enjoy crafting plans that are sustainable for athletes that are juggling kids and work and a multi-sport modality. I really like working with athletes that are able to build in fun mountain adventures, whether it's skis, foot, bikes, into their schedule. I think I solve those busy athlete problems of how we can fit this in and how we can be creative and how you can even incorporate some of your kid activities into your training. I do think the problems that I solve kind of better than anyone else are skimo problems because I've made every mistake and now I make it my job not to let myself make those mistakes. So I'm really good at incorporating kind of problem solving into your daily workouts, whether it's transitions at a high heart rate or incorporating more technical skinning or nutrition on cold days, or selecting the correct skins for different climbs. I think I'm good at incorporating that into training to help you utilize that when it really counts. I think applying some of the skills that I've learned into how I coach athletes is helpful, so I know where you're at because I feel like I've probably been there. I love working with multi-sport athletes because I think it's just an awesome way to mix in different and apply different strategies. Like you might have a running strategy that we're transferring over to skimo, or a skimo strategy that you think applies to biking. And I think it makes it really fun that some days you can go out and it doesn't really feel like a chore to be getting your workout done, but you're just having fun Nordic skiing, or you're going to incorporate some downhill laps on the mountain, or you want to go for kind of a fun run as part of a group run. I help busy athletes balancing training and life to make it fun and successful. I want athletes to acknowledge their hard work and feel confident that they can achieve lofty goals.
What's up? What's up?
Fun intro, Zoe.
Fun intro.
Great job.
Because we have to do this every time. The snack I just ate before we recorded was 2 clementines.
Well, I just had a cinnamon roll.
Ooh, amazing. That sounds awesome.
So I think
you win. That's a superior snack.
That is a better carb game.
Although I did have a giant hunk of monkey bread for breakfast.
Oh, you didn't share.
I treated myself to the coffee shop today.
I was slaving away my athlete logs, and I could have been eating more carbs.
Could have been eating more carbs
It's
like
disappointing.
me.
That is disappointing.
Disappointing, especially because you have some long runs this weekend.
Well, not as long as you.
Not as long as me. I have to run for 6 hours this weekend.
How many days?
Twice.
Are you doing an 8-hour run too?
No, 6, and then 3.
I feel like this is a good segue.
Natural segue.
Our conversation about going long. Breaking through those barriers.
Yeah, this is a conversation I'm excited to have, and I think that it's relevant for all athletes because many people want to run slightly longer than they currently are. I actually don't. I'm just going to go ahead and put my hand up and say that I'm good at 100.
100 miles is enough.
I like that distance. I'm happy there. And I celebrate and applaud people who want to go longer than 100 miles. And I also celebrate and applaud people who are like, I want to run my first marathon. I want to run my first ultra, 50K. I guess that is your first ultra, 100K, 50 miler, whatever it is. We are talking about the science and the physiology about expanding that distance capacity from all perspectives. So I'm pumped to dig into the science.
Yeah. And, you know, just coming off of a weekend where you did 2 4-hour runs, I did
Sure
a
did.
4-hour run and a 3-hour run, and we're headed into our annual boot camp weekends.
I guess it's our new Valentine's Day tradition, which
Yes.
is going not at all doing something romantic, falling asleep at 8 o'clock because we are exhausted
After running for hours.
8 hours. Yeah. Cool.
I mean, you know, it's what we love to do.
Yeah.
And also, you know, our racing goals kind of asks us to do that. We
Yep.
don't, you know, where we live right now, there's not a ton of trail access, although at least we probably won't get smoked by the heat too bad in California.
Yeah.
Because it's been such a warm winter here.
Sure has.
But, you know, part of getting ready for long races is dedicating the time to focus just on that.
Yeah.
And, you know, really kind of like having a very myopic point in the training where the point is just to train and block out,
Yeah.
you know, other aspects of your life for one short 3-day period in order to go long. So then you can be prepared to go even longer.
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, you know me, I love doing long runs. I love also, I feel like I'm at a place where I finally figured some life shit out and I am able to train the way I want. Like right now, I don't feel that work and life are meaningfully changing how I can show up in training for kind of the first time in my life.
That's nice.
And that's really exciting.
Well, I can't wait to talk a little bit more about all of this in the context of our actual the main body of this episode. But before we give it all away,
we have a new batch of Hot or Not. So thank you to everyone who commented, emailed, got in our Slack channel. If you want to be involved in some of these feisty discussions with Microcosm Coaching, you can join our Foothills tier at microcosm-coaching.com. Use the code Foothills10 to join our community for $10 a month. It's definitely worth it. You also get access to 2 hours of one-on-one time with coaches a month. So really great value there. And you get to have hot takes about all of these things on our Slack channel. So
who doesn't love a good hot take?
Hot takes. The first one, TJ, is the enhanced games. Do you know about these?
I don't really know about this. I think this is like the Olympics, but you're able to use in performance enhancing drugs.
Yeah, essentially it's the Olympics, but it's not the Olympics and you can use steroids. So it's this VC-backed event that's debuting in May of 2026 in Las Vegas. So there's almost everything you need to know right there. And it openly allows PEDs or performance enhancing drugs like steroids, testosterone, growth hormone under medical supervision. One of the things I find kind of fascinating and ironic about these games, and my primary source for this is Wired magazine wrote an extraordinary article about these that I'll link to in our show notes because I think it's just one of the best examples of sports reporting I've read in years. It costs $250,000 per event. You get paid $250,000 per event. You get paid $1 million for breaking a world record. It's backed by Peter Thiel. That's a fascinating data point. Trump Jr., fascinating, and the Winklevoss twins. And so that's a real...
The Winklevoss, aren't those the guys from the social networking?
The guys played both by Arnie Hammer. So this is already a very dark place.
You're joking.
Yeah, it's kind of a murderer's row of people who might actually be murderers.
Can I already say not hot? Do we have to go on?
So
the Winklevoss
I'm
twins?
still just defining it. And you're like, nope.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So athletes who compete in this, you have to retire from traditional sport to participate. World Aquatics, like all of these different like USADA organizations are promising lifetime bans for anyone who competes. Because again, these folks are using PEDs openly. The enhanced games argue that they're making doping transparent and medically supervised with cardiac MRIs, blood panels, genomic sequencing, pre-screening. But critics call it this is a great quote, a dangerous clown show that puts profit over principle. That's according to USADA.
Oh.
The biggest concern here that I have is messaging to young athletes that you need to dope to chase your dreams. USADA has also flagged mental health risks of normalizing body modification, particularly for young and vulnerable athletes. Also, the be-all end-all of this is to move supplements. So I think like that, again, for me is going to be a real big no. The big plans are to make money selling direct-to-consumer testosterone, basically comparing themselves to like Red Bull Content House, but for dudes that want to like inject their own tea. Something that I find fascinating about this is they quickly, like at first, the enhanced games were going to be like, there's no limits. You can do whatever you want, however much. They also quickly discovered that even allowing people to use whatever PEDs they want, it doesn't always inherently make their performance better. For instance, with the swimming world records that they've ginned up a lot of press around trying to get people to break, when you do so many steroids, it actually changes your body composition in ways that aren't inherently helpful to swimming performance, because you are carrying more muscle than is necessarily conducive to that amount of speed and increases drag and body surface area and all of these things that change when you take steroids. So there have actually been a lot of athletes whose performances declined. And once you start taking performance enhancing drugs, not only are you maybe not even going to be better at sport, but you're necessarily disenfranchising yourself from all clean competition for forever. You're never going to be able to compete at like real sanctioned events again. You're tainting your own reputation. Coaches don't want to train with these athletes. Athletes aren't going to want to train with coaches that participate. And ironically, because they kept having athletes that were planning to compete in the enhanced games run into medical issues, they've essentially had to add all of these controls and supervision that basically just make it like, well, yeah, those are doping controls. You're still controlling for doping. So like, what are we doing here? You're basically just like moving the goalposts, but in a way that incentivizes, I think, all of the wrong values. It's just a really poor, I think, example of value capture and attention capture, with like the end goal only being making a few tech dudes like extremely richer off of selling supplements. So there's basically nothing about this that appeals to me on literally any level. That's my take.
It. So that was what I heard there was not hot.
Not hot.
That's what I heard.
I do think, I think it is a fascinating cultural artifact, but I mean, this goes without saying that we are unequivocally in favor of clean sport. Doping sucks. Like what are we doing here if not fighting to protect our values, guys? Like, What is sport for? Like how you show up in the sport can show how you show up in life. And like, as an athlete, I want to show up in my training the way I want to show up in my work, in my partnership with TJ, in all of these ways. And if you're willing to compromise on something even as like low stakes as like amateur running, like what else are you willing to compromise on? Like, what are your actual values and who are you?
I do think we could go into like a 15-minute side quest into trying to understand the values of an athlete that would...
Well, the value here would just be money and the ability to sell supplements and capture attention. That's the clear end goal.
For sure. But what does an individual's values have to be in order to, I guess, go to sleep at night knowing that
if your primary value is money, I'm sure it's very easy to sleep at night within this framework, but we just disagree on values because money is not my primary value.
No, it's not. And I don't know. It's just crazy to think that this is going to get a lot of views. Yeah. This is going to suck up a lot of attention. And, likely there will be some world records broken, but
a couple. But like, again, one of the things that's fascinating, and I would really encourage people to read the Wired article, is like, there've been several swimmers repeatedly trying to break these world records in the lead up to the games. And like, I superficially thought as soon as you started doping, like bing, bang, boom, must be so easy. But again, not really. It just changes things. So like, you're compromising your value, you're sacrificing everything that makes sport beautiful for fucking what, guys?
What? So you can sell a few more products.
So that Peter Thiel can sell products. Like, you're not even going to benefit as much as like...
No, not just Peter Thiel, the Winklevoss twins.
Yes.
Those guys are still angry from
the third worst Trump son.
Yeah, they got Facebook foisted from them. Yeah. And they're still angry.
Exactly. So all of this is bad. It's bad, bad, bad.
All right, let's move on here. Let's move on. Face glitter, hot or not? How did
I
this
love
get
this.
into the outline?
And now for something completely different. I'm all about it. No science needed, purely vibes. I think this is really fun at race start lines. I think photographs great. Something that I love as like a gal's gal is seeing women show up in the sport in ways that like I think early on in the sport there, particularly for folks socialized as women, it was like there's only one way to be a woman in the sport, and that's basically to be a man. And I love seeing women show up on the start lines of these races ready to kick ass, like Tara Dower freaking, just tearing it up in face glitter, like being unapologetically feminine, being sparkly, being fun, showing that you don't have to conform to masculine ideals when you roll up to the start line to do something that historically has been coded as masculine, but now we're all collectively re-encoding as being a genderless, like glittery free-for-all.
Hey, have fun with it.
That's what I say.
Bet you get some cool tan lines with all the glitter on your face.
I got some glitter freckles to wear for various races.
There you go.
So I'm all in on this. Just be careful that you don't get like actual glitter in your eyes. I would recommend the like fake tattoo freckles rather than like anything that is like actual particulate matter that you could sweat into your eyeballs.
Okay, well, let's not do that.
Yep.
Let's get into
better than PEDs.
Let's get into something a little more interesting for me. Stair steppers and stair climbers, hot or not? Okay, wow. I think yes, we're having a little bit of a TikTok moment with this, right? Like this is pretty popular on the internet.
This is big. Like you're seeing this thing called the 25-7-2 workout, which encourages people to work out level 7 for 25 minutes twice a week. Great. That should already tell you something. Anytime something has a cute brand name, I'm like already so skeptical.
I feel like my Garmin tells me to do that.
If there's a hashtag for it, I'm out. So research does show stair climbing improved aerobic capacity by 12% versus 16% for running over 9 weeks. So it works, but running is still more effective. And if you're listening to this, potentially you like running. It also targets glutes, quads, hamstrings, calves, hip flexors, and core. But the problem here is that, again, it's basically running without the specificity of actually running. It doesn't load the system in a different enough way to meaningfully be helpful cross-training.
Well, it's not really running. It's more like
it
power
taxes
hiking.
the same things,
right?
But doesn't help the same things,
right? Well, there's no impact forces, which we know is not great. We talked a little bit about this 2 podcasts ago when we went over some of the physiological disadvantages to going through an injury or having to take time off. And one of those things is when we're not running, our body loses some of those structural adaptations. When we don't have those impact forces, the body gets used to not having those impact forces. And then as we ramp back up, it has to get used to that again. So when we're doing the stair stepper, we kind of lose out on the body's ability to adjust to the pounding that is really pretty unique to running.
Yeah. I think the big thing is that like most people will just be grinding away on the Stairmaster at a steady effort, aka in the gray zone. I think people really tend to overrate this when they're using it. Like flatlanders are using this to train for mountains because even on a steep 15% grade, most movement is still primarily horizontal. So flat running economy is still the most important variable, not just leg strength. So I think the take here is that you should build your aerobic engine first, simulate mountains second. If you are training to hike up a mountain, I think this can be a robust addition. But again, anything less than 15%, which is quite steep, running is going to be the best predictor of your success there.
Well, and I would say, again, like if you do want to improve your uphill ability, 1, get faster first.
Mm-hmm.
2nd, get fit, really fit, and then train specifically.
Mm-hmm.
So use a treadmill that can go up to, 12% grade. Mm-hmm. Running at 15% grade isn't that effective because your stride's going to change a lot.
Yeah.
Even above 8% grade, your stride does start to change, although it's less perceivable. But when you get up to above 12 into 15% range, it's more of a bounding motion, which is biomechanically very different. The neuromuscular aspect of that is very different than a regular running motion. There are nuances there, but if you want to run uphill, you have to practice running uphill. And doing the Stairmaster could be good cross training to help you build fitness, but it's not going to help you run faster uphill necessarily because it doesn't have the same like it just doesn't have the same neuromuscular aspects and biomechanical patterns.
Yeah, so I think stair steppers are pretty overrated. If you can run, just run. If you want to train for mountains, get an incline treadmill and build a big aerobic base, and that will serve you way better. The TikTok virality, I think, is doing the heavy lifting here, not the science and not the evidence. I think it's a fine tool for some things, but it's definitely not a game changer the way the algorithm might want you to think it is.
Not hot.
Not hot.
All right, smart shoes. I feel like I saw a commercial for this on my YouTube.
Yeah.
And I X'd out of it after 5 seconds
Yeah, it seems
because
right.
I was like, this is kind of silly. But let's talk about it, because if I've seen this and I don't do much interneting, I bet you a lot of other people have seen this already.
So one of the big ones we're seeing is Avelo, which is an ex-Nike team of folks came together to build the shoe that has midsole sensors that don't require charging, and that measures impact and form in real time. It generates a resiliency score, which is like Whoop recovery, but running specific. It also has a form radar that flags when mechanics degrade mid-run, and daily, weekly mileage recommendations. So your little ears, TJ, should probably be perking up.
They are.
There's also the Arkema Movementa, developing battery-free sensors for major shoe brands, which track sole absorption and wear in real time. We're looking at potential commercial deployment this summer. There's also the Nike Mind, which is a quote-unquote neuroscience-based shoe. Yep. Claiming to activate sensory receptors for mindset benefits.
Oh, no, guys.
Yeah, which sounds like marketing in search of a problem. There's also Nike Project Amplify, which is literally a motorized robotic shoe with a belt drive, motor, and rechargeable battery cuff to make walking and running easier. I think there's
Can I use those
solid. Okay, there's
an
adaptive argument. I am all for investing in technology that helps expand access to adaptive athletes, folks with movement disabilities. Fucking love that. That's not what we're talking about here. So I think
it's
that
an e-bike for running.
Again, I think that e-bikes. I'm not interested in the arguments that just want to shit on e-bikes. I think there are valid use cases that aren't just like, oh, everyone should just be working out all the time. But I think that I do want to approach with a little bit of skepticism. Some form breakdown data could be generally useful, but knowing when your gait falls apart on mile 18 is real information, and the risk is the same as with any wearable. Athletes are going to be obsessing over numbers that are fed through a black box algorithm that we can't assess. Again, I think it's marketing in search of a problem. Honestly, I think the most useful thing here would be just getting athletes away from running in their shoes for 600 miles. Like, the amount of time I have athletes with foot or knee and leg problems, and I'm like, whoa, what's going on? And they're like, well, I've put 800 miles on these Sauconys. Guys, shoes are 300, 400 miles max. Some only 200 miles now.
Yeah.
With these new supercritical foams, degrade pretty quickly. Depends on the runner, depends on the gait, depends on the shoe. But don't try to wear your shoes into the ground, trying to save a couple cents. I think that, again, your body is already basically a smart shoe, and more data isn't always better data. And I think it's better for athletes to learn to listen to their bodies and get a gadget second, third, fourth, maybe fifth, or not ever. The motorized shoe thing, again, I'm not really sure who that's for.
Fascinating. I can't wait to see that, though.
Helps access for folks with movement limitations, love it. Otherwise, I'm, again, not super interested. So I think that the best use case here is tracking mileage on your shoes, but that's also something you can do with a pen and paper.
But what if you had little e-bike shoes and you could just throw those on at mile 85 or 100?
You can't bait me. You will not bait me.
You're just running. You're just gliding out there.
We already have laws outlined about shoes. You can't enhance mechanics. You can't meaningfully build off of existent mechanics, which is why some of the shoes with extremely large, you can't have springs, but plated shoes are technically not springs because they don't enhance mechanics. They just respond to existing mechanics.
It's just like having a trampoline in the bottom of each shoe.
This is dumb as hell, and I'm honestly not interested in this conversation.
But the enhanced games.
Again, what are we doing here, folks? If you don't want to run, stop listening to this podcast. You have better shit to do.
All right, you heard it here. That's a hot take. All right, let's get into the science of training beyond your comfort zone. Couple things to think about here. I feel like everybody has that distance that sounds impossible. And for some folks, it could be a 10K. For others, that might be a half marathon or a marathon, 50 miles, 100 miles, 200 miles. Maybe you're running Tour de Gent. I think that's like
All the miles.
250 miles. With like 60,000 feet of elevation gain. I mean, there's literally some insane stuff out there. But here's the thing. The process for preparing for a distance that scares you is pretty much identical no matter what the distance is. The physiology is the same. What you're training is the same. The mental game, the same. There are some little nuances in there for each individual distance or the specificity of the individual race.
Yeah, the Boston Marathon and the Arizona Monster 300 are going to be different.
They're different, but many of the physiological and psychological aspects of that training process are actually the same and comparable. And I think that should maybe help people in hearing that they can like breathe a sigh of relief. I don't necessarily need to do anything different if I'm a marathon runner that has ultra running aspirations. I kind of just do the same thing I'm doing now, but a little different, maybe a little more volume. And eventually I get the same adaptations. It's the same adaptations that are going to help me be successful there. So today we're going to talk a lot about that. We're going to talk about what it takes to go longer. And then we're also going to talk about whether, you're holding yourself back psychologically and what we can do to work through that. What are some of those like self-limiters that we see in athletes? What are some of the mistakes they make that make it hard for them to, move up in distance?
Yeah. So first I want to talk about why running longer is different and why it's not just about adding on more miles. So going long really isn't more of the same. After about 90 minutes to 2 hours of running, your body enters a fundamentally different physiological landscape. And understanding why and how, I think, is really important for athletes who want to train smarter and not just more. So I want to talk a little bit about the glycogen ceiling and how your metabolism shifts when you go longer. So your body stores roughly 1,500 to 2,000 calories of glycogen in the muscle and liver. So at moderate effort, you'll burn through that in like 90 to 120 minutes. And that's why the marathon wall exists and why ultra distances force you into a completely different metabolic reality, essentially. Once your glycogen starts depleting, your body increasingly relies on fat oxidation for fuel. Fat is abundant. Even a lean runner has over 50,000 calories stored as fat, but it requires more oxygen to convert it to energy. Boo. It's a slower fuel source. So that's why you slow down at ultra distances. It's not just that you're less fit. You're literally running on a different fuel mix. And again, depending on like if you're taking in more or less exogenous carbohydrates and what like percentage of your lactate threshold you're running at, there's going to be individual variability here.
So a couple practical takeaways to think about. The first one here, training long teaches your body to oxidize fat more efficiently at higher intensities. So that crossover point in which you are using more carbohydrate compared to fat, we can bump that up further and further the fitter you are. So you're using more and more fat. You're still using carbohydrate. Remember that. We talk a lot about fuel.
It's like a sliding scale. It's not like you hit like a specific crossover point where it's like all carb or all fat. It's a spectrum with multiple factors that determine where on that spectrum you are.
So the second thing here is to think about how your mitochondria is going to change over time as you train more to support this, and that both of these things, like the utilization of fat and carbohydrate, having more efficient mitochondria and denser capillary beds in this entire process of angiogenesis, which we're going to talk about next, all of that is trainable.
Yeah.
It's not just genetic. So,
which is also why it's so important for you to run your easy days easy enough, because if you're pushing too hard into the gray zone and beyond on those easy days, running those recovery and endurance days too hard, you're not giving your body that chance to get more efficient at oxidizing fat because you're going to be pushing it to burn more carbohydrates.
Right. And this is one of the reasons why you've got to run those easy runs really, truly easy. So maybe imagine that your body has two fuel tanks.
Yep.
One is a smaller one. That's your glycogen fuel tank, but it's higher octane. It burns fast. It's great for speed, going at, higher intensity levels. And then you have a bigger one. This is your kind of your fat fuel tank. And that's like the diesel. You have a huge capacity, but it's slower to access. It's not as efficient. Going long, is about teaching your engine to run more efficiently on diesel so you don't run out. And when we're training, what we mentioned earlier, like doesn't matter if you're doing 10K or you're doing 100 miles, we are training this system. We are looking to make improvements here no matter what distance you're running.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about mitochondria. Again, those are the part of your muscle cells where aerobic energy production actually happens. So they take oxygen and fuel, fat or carbs, and produce ATP, to go back to biology 101, which is the energy currency your muscles use to contract. Endurance training increases both the number and the size of mitochondria in your muscle fibers. More mitochondria means more capacity to produce energy aerobically, and you can sustain effort longer before you go anaerobic. It's like more free energy, more free little powerhouse of the cells.
Love those little powerhouses. So this is why easy volume matters so much.
Yep.
You don't build mitochondrial density doing your tempo runs. You don't do it during threshold training. You don't do it during VO2 max. Although all of that is helpful and supportive.
It's not optimizing for mitochondrial development.
Where you really build this is zone 1, zone 2 training.
Mm-hmm. So, I would think of mitochondria like power plants in a city. Each one produces energy. So the more that you build, the more total energy you can produce without any single one being maxed out. Easy running, zone 1, zone 2, is what builds more power plants. Hard running just makes the existing ones work harder.
So let me ask you, Zoe, before we jump into segment 2, we don't want to not talk about connective tissue, the muscular skeletal system, and the adaptation mismatch that occurs. Have you ever seen in some of your training with your athletes that mismatch between, cardio readiness, like my fitness is really increasing rapidly, but also the kind of the challenge here, which is that my structural adaptations are much slower. They're lagging behind. And so then often we get injuries, we get niggles that hold us back.
Yeah, it's just because those adaptation timelines are asynchronous. Muscles adapt to training stress in 2 to 4 weeks. Tendons, ligaments, and bones adapt in 6 to 12 months. That mismatch is where injuries come from, and when people ramp up too fast for a long event, even though they quote unquote feel good.
Right.
Sure, your engine might be able to sustain the work, but we got to worry about the chassis as well. Your cardiovascular system will be ready for ultra distances way before your connective tissue is. So you have to respect the reality of that lag. And that's why you can't just add miles to a marathon plan and call it ultra training. The volume build has to be gradual enough that your structural tissues can keep up with your engine.
Right. So we're still looking for those same physiological adaptations, but now we also have to control for adaptations in the
durability.
Right.
Becomes more important with more distance.
I know for me, this couldn't have been more true in my year last year, where I bumped up my volume significantly by like almost 2 hours a week on average for the year. And I just had niggles like the whole year long. And physically I felt really good, but unfortunately my body just could not catch up, and it took me like a whole year for my body to finally catch up to it.
Yeah, again, the physiological reality, and add to that the complexity of athletes that have any kind of energy deficiency. If you're not eating enough, if you're not recovering well, that's going to undermine, your bones' ability to recover in between sessions, your tendons, your muscles' ability. So even if, someone like working with athletes that have had eating disorders, restrictive eating, disordered eating, and they're 20s, even if we're working with them in their 40s, the long metabolic tail of those impacts might still limit the volume of those athletes, might still limit the durability of those athletes in a way that you have to respect and take into account, which, again, I think is a great reason to hire a coach if you're sort of living in the shadow of recovering from any sort of fueling inefficiencies.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's get into building your long run. I think this is what everybody wants to hear. How do I build my long run? How should I build up my volume gradually? Should I rapidly build it up? Maybe not. But how long should I go? How much does it matter? How much emphasis? How much what percentage of my weekly total volume? I mean, there's just so many questions that athletes have here. So what's the big idea?
Yeah, so the long run is sort of the centerpiece of a lot of going long training, but I think a lot of folks do it wrong. They go too hard or go too long too soon, or they don't understand what the long run is actually trying to achieve in the context of their training. So let's talk about what it is actually trying to simulate here, trying to stimulate. It's not the race simulation. That is the number one mistake that we see with long runs. It's training your aerobic system to sustain fat oxidation, building mitochondrial density, improving capillarization, so more blood vessels to deliver oxygen to your working muscles, and training your gut how to process fuel. So when you run at easy to moderate effort consistently, your body will actually build new capillaries, those tiny blood vessels around your muscle fibers. More of those means more routes for oxygen-rich blood to reach your muscles. Better oxygen delivery means you can sustain effort longer. This is one of the biggest adaptations from easy running that I think folks don't talk about enough. I also want to talk a little bit about the psychology of going long. Maybe you can explain how this relates to the central governor theory, because I feel like this is a TJ moment.
Oh, such a TJ moment here.
You love the brain. You're all about the brain.
Gosh, I love and hate the brain. So your brain is conservative. We all have this part of us that wants to protect us from doing too much, from, exceeding our limits. There's self-preservation here. If it wasn't for this, we would never have, adapted and graduated from being cavemen and survived to being, humans in a modern world here today. So the central governor theory is basically thinks about that, like our brain signals to our body to stop long before we've ever reached like a actual physiological limit, because it's a protective mechanism.
Yep.
We don't want to go too far because we might get hurt. We're going to put our well-being in jeopardy. So part of training long actually teaches our body that it's okay, teaches our brain, our nervous system that it's okay, we're fine, we're going to be all right, and we can go longer. And that's real, that's trainable, but it's something that has to occur gradually. If you rip the Band-Aid off somebody who's, never done a 50K and they're used to doing a 2-hour run and just say, go run a 50K tomorrow, they, after 3 or 4 hours, they might just shut down. They might start walking when they could still be running. And we actually will see this with well-trained athletes too, not athletes who are just making big jumps, but if they haven't put the proper steps in place, psychologically, they can't handle the gap that exists with where they are and where they will be, which is a really big challenge when we start thinking about how to train for distances like 100 miles, for example, because you're not going to run 100 miles in training to run a 100 miler.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be some gaps, which means we really have to focus on training the mind within the context of our training in order to prepare for, making these big jumps in racing distance.
Yeah. So let's talk about how to build long run duration. So I don't like to put a specific number to this because I feel like that ignores the importance of individual variability.
Right.
But not like doubling your long run, no huge jumps in long run volume. And thinking that a lot of people's long run, again, like generally, I'm not doing this in my own training right now. So again, individual variability because I'm training for a 75-mile race. But I think a decent rule of thumb for self-coached folks is having your long run not exceed more than 30% of your total weekly volume. Again, thinking in time, not miles. For ultra prep, I would say building to a long run of 3 to 4 hours is sufficient for most 50K to potentially even 50-mile races. You do not need to run the full race distance in training because the physiological adaptations plateau well before the race distance, and the injury risk of running 50 miles in training outweighs the very marginal benefit.
I want to jump into here because a lot of athletes, they get really nervous. I'm doing a 50K, I'm doing a 50 miler. This 50 miler is going to be 10 hours, but I'm only doing a 4-hour long run. Well, there's other ways to work within the constraints, like adding back-to-back long runs, which is a much safer way to start.
I don't even say it's constraints. It's just like not being a dumbass, because you can still get 90% of that adaptation at 60 to 70% of the race distance. So again, it's you're thinking of trade-offs, like knowing that you're going to get less bang for your buck going those additional 20 miles. Don't do those additional 20 miles because those are resources that you should be allocating to recovery or other training adaptations.
Yeah, I agree. But, as coaches, we always have to work within the psychology of our athletes who, quite
Yes.
honestly,
And if your psychology is dumb, reach out, microcosmcoaching@gmail.com. If you're a dumbass, we accept all people.
there's a learning curve for all
Yes,
of this
yes.
stuff. And not a lot of athletes are going to feel confident going into their first 50K or 50 miler with just a 4 hour long run. Which is why, again, there's other tools here and ways to think about this stuff. Back-to-back long runs. Maybe occasionally we do runs that are longer than 4 hours. I would really, if you're an athlete who's training for, a new distance, especially ultra distance, think about also, how you're ramping up your volume of long runs week to week. If you're a newer athlete, probably start with smaller increments, 15 minutes at a time, and, increasing 15, 20 minutes at a time. If you're more intermediate, you could probably handle, 30-minute jumps. And then if you're a really advanced athlete, elite runner, you can handle large jumps. We're
Larger
talking about,
oscillations, hours.
yeah, we're talking about hours difference. 1 week doing a 3 hour run, the next week doing 4, 1 week doing 4, then doing a 6 hour run as you're going to do this week, Zoe. But like that takes a lot of time and training history for the body to be able to handle that, and for your brain not to freak out
Yeah.
and be like, whoa, this is too much. But again, a lot of ways to look at this. Also, the long run is amazing, but your weekly cumulative time.
I think that's a huge mistake we see people make, particularly folks that are like, I'm doing my first ultra, first 100, whatever it is overemphasizing the long run. It is important, but it's only ever going to be a percent of your total
Right,
training volume.
30%. So, look at the other work that you're doing, the workouts, the total hours of training you're doing week to week. That can really help with some of those confidence gaps that exist. So RPE on these long runs is really, really important.
Yeah, so we're thinking of RPE 5 to 6 endurance runs for most of the duration. If you drift into RPE 7 plus on a long run, you're turning that into a steady state session and you're creating more fatigue than intended. I will prescribe steady state for my more intermediate advanced athletes, but that's really not where we want beginners living, particularly starting out too fast because you feel fresh and then finishing depleted and wrecked. That's just going to compromise the rest of your training week, and you didn't get any better adaptation from going faster. Going faster doesn't mean more fitness within the constraints of like staying within executing the intended effort. The adaptations are the same at the easy end of the prescribed zone versus the fast end. The only difference there is that fatigue cost.
Yep. And that's no good if you want to recover well.
Nope.
From your training. Before we move on, let's talk about time versus distance or mileage based training, because this is a question we get a ton as coaches. We've talked about this a number of times on the podcast before, but we can never talk about it too much because I still see coaches who have been coaching for a long time in the space giving athletes training by miles. And I don't understand why they don't change their practices, because it's really outdated. So again, I'm just going to tell you guys, think in terms of time. I went out and ran a 25-mile run on Sunday, and I was like, oh man, I don't even think in terms of miles anymore.
Me neither.
Like all I'm thinking about is in terms of time.
I was thinking like my whole relationship to time and space is totally effed right now.
Yeah, like it's totally, it's really different. And when you get into these longer races, having done your training by time, you have such a different understanding, a more informed understanding of just how much energy you need to, finish these distances. You have a better understanding of what you can actually expend versus like what you need to leave in reserve. You're better able to kind of like work within the constraints of that central governor because you're thinking now in
Yeah.
terms of time, which is a much better proxy for stress because the body has no idea what a mile is.
Correct. It knows what stress is, it knows what effort is. And a 20-mile long run on flat roads is just a fundamentally different stimulus than 20 miles with 5,000 feet of climbing. Same distance, but they have wildly different physiological costs. So training by time helps keep you honest about the actual stress you're putting on your body, and it'll stop you from chasing arbitrary mileage numbers that don't account for terrain, weather, or fatigue. So here we did do an entire episode on fueling last week, so I don't want to totally belabor the point, but it is really important because another of the biggest mistakes I see athletes make is not fueling their long runs well. And a lot of times when people have like a hang up about running longer, or they feel that it's like unduly difficult relative to their fitness, a lot of time that's because of insufficient fueling.
So maybe just a very quick recap on this. 60 to 90 grams of carbs per hour is the gold standard.
Yep.
When you start to do long runs that are more than probably 2 hours, I would really be considering this kind of fueling standard. For runs 2 hours and less, yes, carbohydrates are great, but we're really not out there for that long. Runs 90 minutes or less, probably don't need to do a ton of fueling there. But again, you've already heard
If you feel like you need to fuel, go for it.
Yeah.
But I think that would raise the question of, could we be doing something better outside of the running as well? And the importance of gut training is something that I think can't be overstated, because your gut adapts to processing fuel during exercise, but only if and when you practice it.
And that's the real key, right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that we've talked about consistently so far in this podcast is that the physiological adaptations that we're going for in a 10K versus half marathon, 100-miler, et cetera, are fairly universal across the board. But the longer our events, the more they require different kinds of fueling.
Yeah.
When we're talking about events that are longer than 2 hours, particularly events longer than 3 or even longer than 6, fueling becomes so integral to this. And if you are doing like a proper long run build up, these things are taking place over 12 to 16 week periods. Gives you ample time to really train the gut to be able to handle, 60, 70, 80, 90 grams of carbs an hour. But if you are, panic training with 8 weeks to go before your marathon, your 50K or upward, 100-mile race, you don't have the time. You don't have the window to adequately train your gut. And you're probably going to have issues during the race if you try to fuel at those levels, that's going to be tough. It's going to limit your performance.
Yeah. GI distress during races is almost always a training problem, not a stomach problem. You just didn't train your gut. So again, the fix isn't to eat less. It's to start with smaller amounts in your training and build up that tolerance over weeks and weeks. So let's talk a bit more about the mental, structural, and practical things here. I do want to just touch briefly on strength training, because when you're running for 4, 6, 8+ hours, your form degrades as your muscles fatigue. And that degradation shifts load to your tendons, ligaments, and joints. Strength training builds the muscular endurance to maintain form longer, and that's where durability comes from. I know there's been a lot of flashy conversation about muscular endurance and using weight vests. I think that is stupid, because if you're training well, like, the benefit of running is not only does running like help with the aerobic fitness component of running, but it also helps with the muscular durability component. No hacks needed. So, I think there's a common worry that strength training will interfere with endurance adaptations, but for endurance athletes that are doing a moderate amount of strength work, the research consistently shows that isn't a concern with a well-designed and periodized strength program. Strength and endurance can coexist just fine, as long as you make sure the strength work stays at the prescribed effort level and separate it from key running sessions by a few hours. They should be complementary and not competing.
So let's get into mental game a little bit here. When your brain wants to quit, what are a few things we can do to work through that? So your brain's job is to protect you, as we talked about earlier. And at unfamiliar durations, it's going to generate increasingly loud signals to stop. That you're not necessarily in danger, but it's unfamiliar. And so you're going to get those pretty real signals that things are not okay. A couple tools here. I think about segmenting for athletes a lot, breaking something bigger into smaller chunks. So, for example, making it to this next aid station or getting to that next tree as a really exaggerated way. I think about Ann Trace, and it said on my bib at Western States, I go tree to tree. And that is really like running long in its essence. Break that big thing down into smaller pieces to make
evidence
it feel.
that shows that actually fundamentally lowers your perception of the effort and is a good strategy.
Well, and it's one of our key psychological skills. So it's backed up by a lot of research. I think another important mental skill here is distinguishing between, what's uncomfortable and what's actually dangerous. Going long means being uncomfortable, and affirm that to yourself. Like a hard training session is an opportunity to be with discomfort for a prolonged period of time, which will help with your tolerance of that in the future. But also like dangerous is like shooting pains and, acute discomfort. Those are very different than like, I feel tired. This is really hard. And being able to distinguish between those two things is a really important key, because when you're trying to finish your first 50K, a lot of that's going to feel really uncomfortable for a really long time.
Yep. And again, I think just want to make a quick appeal for specificity. If your long race is on trails, train on trails. If it has significant climbing, train on hills. If your race is at altitude, you'll need exposure to altitude. A flat road marathon plan will not prepare you for a mountain 50K and vice versa. As much as you can, practice in the gear you'll race in. Like especially if you're doing one of these UTMB events where you have to carry a heavy pack, practice with that. Practice eating what you will eat on race day. Practice as many unknowns as possible. And remember that race day is not the time to try new things.
Yeah, I think just one piece of advice maybe for folks who are thinking about, increasing their long run distance or stepping up to a new race is just give yourself the runway to prepare for that goal.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to happen overnight, and often the best training happens over really long swaths of time. And that means you can actually engage with the right kind of training at the right time for the right duration. So when you get to that event day, you're truly prepared. You're not burned out. You'll likely be really successful and achieve your goal. And then you'll have done so in a sustainable way that then you can recover and take all of that work along with you to the next thing, rather than it being one of these scenarios where we create a pretty bad burnout.
Yeah, but again, I think I just want to acknowledge you don't need to be a certain type of runner to go long. You don't need a certain pace, body type, or a certain number of years of experience. The biggest barrier isn't fitness, it's belief and giving yourself that sufficiently long runway. I would say if you're unnecessarily rushing the training timeline, that's not what self-belief looks like.
No.
So if you've been thinking about it, this is your sign. Sign up for the thing. We'll help you figure out the rest.
Yeah, and you can do it. Just give yourself the adequate amount of time for it.
Yes.
All right, guys. Thank you. We will see you again next week. So
send us more hot or not.
Yes, please. And join the community. Reach out, microcosmcoaching@gmail.com.